Hey guys, welcome back to a Summer of Ecclesiastes. We are continuing what we were working on, and as you look at the various techniques that Solomon uses, we talked about chiasm, we talked about poetry, we talked about uh, just a little bit of his own biography that he's using as he unpacks some of this material. What he's going to do is he's going to take all that and he's going to put it all together, and I want you to remember that illustration I used about half of a sentence. You cannot judge someone on half of a sentence. Let them finish the thought, and that way you can judge what they said. Don't judge them by the little snippet that you heard. Solomon's going to be that way. And so if you even think with the chiasm where he's building point A, point B, point C, point D, and you're like, where are you going with this? And then suddenly you see the reversal or you see the repetition and you're like, oh, I get what you did. So he's going to start at the beginning as a speaker, and he's going to end at the ending as a speaker, and you need to know what he's talking about as you go throughout that material. So how does this all play out? Well, here's the thing. It is wisdom literature. That's the thing you need to understand. And what wisdom literature, specifically in Ecclesiastes, is trying to do is it is trying to get you to reconsider your life by bringing up supposed contradictions. And so it's these apparent contradictions, because that's what they are. These apparent contradictions are getting you to stop and recalibrate and getting you to focus on the right thing. That's why he's going to say things like, death is better to focus on than life. You know, death is better. It's better to go into the house of mourning than the house of praise. And all of this is just him saying, you need to recalibrate your life. And so what he's going to do is he's going to insert all of these things. We call them goads. And I'll explain in just a sec how that all works. Now, he's some of the contradictions he's going to bring out is this idea of like, you think pleasurable things, they're going to actually bring, pleasure. But they don't. They bring grief. And that just doesn't make sense to him. Accomplishments. Of all the things that should leave a lasting legacy, accomplishments should. But they don't, and ultimately they lead to you being forgotten. That doesn't make any sense to him. Kings, they rule, and you think of all people, kings could rule to their own benefit, but there's these kings out there who rule to their own hurt. And he's bringing up all of these contradictions because they don't make sense. They seem to be a very redefinition of the essential terms. And again, even things like wisdom, not protecting the wise. See the side note that I just released. That side note is going to kind of help you understand why wisdom's still worth living for. But if you want to imagine, back in the day, they cast lots, which meant they put a bunch of rocks in a bag, and either they would pull the rock out, and if your rock was the one that they chose, then they would choose you, or they somehow threw the bag, and the rock that went farthest. Think about that, okay? It's like drawing the short straw. And I use the illustration that wisdom allows you to stack the deck. It allows you to slip a few more of your rocks into the bag. Now, you're always going to have other rocks. There's nothing you can do about that. There's always going to be, if let's say you're the white rock. If you have 100 rocks in a bag, wisdom is slowly putting more and more and more and more in, but there's still going to be the same number of black rocks. It's just going to happen. And so you just need to understand that wisdom is a defense. Wisdom is a protection, but you still could lose that wager. So that's the idea. Wisdom does not always protect the wise, but sometimes it does. Foolishness sometimes receive the benefits of a wise man. That doesn't make any sense. And so these are all the contradictions that Solomon is dealing with, where he's like, I don't get it. You think of all people, and you would go through the book of Proverbs, and you're dealing with all of the promises to wise men, and those generally hold true, but Solomon is bringing up the contradiction in that they don't always. It's not an every time sort of thing. And so those are some of the issues, contradiction-wise, that he's dealing with here. And so what he's doing is he is trying to goad you. Now, you have to understand what a goad is. Again, a goad is a cattle prod, for lack of a better word. If you think about back in the day, they would have this big spike that they would drive into the back of the animal, and that goad would get the animal to keep going. And so you think even in the context of Paul, he's riding on the road to Damascus, and what does Paul do? He keeps resisting the prodding of the Lord, and Jesus knocks him off of his horse and face down in the dirt, and he says, it is hard for you to kick against the pricks. And this idea is there are these spikes that are poking to keep the animal going, and the animal can resist and kick against it, or the animal can give in and the pressure lets up. And so it's how you move a horse. Your horse, you're using your hands, you're using your feet, you're using the bit in the horse's mouth. All of those, they're all pressure, and you push the horse in such a way through pressure to get the horse to do what you want it to do. And so all of those are examples of goads, but in this context, it is like a big pointy stick that you're just jabbing the thing with. And so this is an example of some of those things. So Solomon is attempting to show through contradiction and through other things that don't quite make sense where you need to go. It's goading you in the right direction. Now, what you need to do when you are dealing with this issue is you need to combine your reflection with God's revelation. And this then produces a dependency on God. If you don't, it will lead to despair. So that's the really key that's important to remember. When you run into this goad and it starts prodding you in a certain direction, you are going to need to both reflect on your own life, but also on what God has told you. Because again, otherwise you're going to spiral. And so again, put those two together. I'm pulling some of this information from Jim Berg. He has an excellent study, and it goes through a lot of this goads. And he goes through the book of Ecclesiastes and really focuses on all the goads and how Solomon uses them. So I think that's a really, really good thing to look at. Now, according to Berg, some of the goads are these things right here. As you struggle, as you observe man doing his typical human thing, it's going to lead you to reflect. The emptiness that comes from something that should be pleasurable will cause you to pause and reflect. The brevity of life is going to pause and lead you to reflect. The boredom of life, so things that should have interested you, things that should have fascinated you, and they don't. Again, it's bringing up what are you living for, what is permanent and what's not. And then also, you do all this work, you expend all this energy, and then what happens? You just have to start over and do it again. And so these are observations that Jim Berg brings up. Again, I recommend you to go study out his take on Ecclesiastes. I think it's an excellent grouping. And so this is an example of how you can approach Ecclesiastes in so many different ways. And he did. He took Ecclesiastes 12, 11 and 12, where it talks about the words of the wise are as goads. And then what he did is he just went right through the book of Ecclesiastes and he said, this is a goad, and this is a goad, and this is a goad, and this is a goad. And so that is something that we're going to spend a little bit of time going through his take on this because I think it's very, very powerful. So just a little bit here, guys, just with the goads and just what you need to know about it. And we will dig into this a little bit more next time as we actually just dive right in and look at a lot of these goads that men like Jim Berg and Solomon are going to expound on for our own life. Because again, it's going to get us to stop at an apparent contradiction and reconsider what we're living for.